It's fantastic to see everyone here, people from all over the world, and some of our partners from Asia who've been sitting patiently waiting on us, doing what we're doing. Now, for this, probably it's worth noting with the SAFE network, because I spend a lot of time looking at other projects in the crypto world, and prices going up, prices going down, and sometimes even get a little bit interested in it. But it's completely boring. It's completely nothing to do with the SAFE network. And I say that because the reason that this thing started was in the late 90s, round about the turn of the century. It was obvious that things were going bad, that things were going not from a place where the internet was just allowing people to connect to each other, but it was a place where people were being controlled by large corporations and governments, and held back. Now, I remember a story, it was a long, long time ago, and it was, some stuff was happening, as it always is, in Palestine, and some Palestinian and Israeli were sitting in cafes in their own countries, should we say, and started speaking to each other, and the Palestinian was realising that he didn't really hate Jews, and the Israeli was realising that Arabs were completely evil, and when they swapped stories about their families and what had happened and all, they started connecting, and they didn't want to kill each other anymore. And that story always resonated with me as, well, that's what the internet should do. It should connect all these people and say, look, this person of this colour or this race or this religion is not evil, just speak to them. And that's what the internet should have been. The other, so that was a kind of philosophical reason for why do what we're doing with SAFE. The other sort of thing was, if you take the way that the whole thing developed, you know, we had these computers, then we get some hard disks, or we get some floppy disks, then double floppy disks, then hard disks, then servers for companies, and then as companies became larger, we get metropolitan area networks, so you had a bunch of servers connecting in a campus, and then you had sort of wide area networks across countries for companies to keep their own private data, and it was their own private data, and it was they spoke to themselves and not to other companies. Kind of made a bit of sense because it was just intra-company communications. When the internet came along, it kind of went a bit bonkers, because all of these companies and us individuals, we had like CompuServe and various things, and this is what annoyed me a little bit. They started and they became the server of this large virtual company, which turned out to be the world, the internet. And I'm an engineer at heart, maybe not a very good one, but I'm an engineer at heart. And it seems quite silly, because if you train someone in engineering or computing, and you say there's going to be a computer on every single person's desk all over the world, and even in their pockets now, which when we started that wasn't the case, it's obvious that proliferation of computers was going to become extensive. And when computers become a penny per processor, you're going to be wearing hundreds of them. So if you give that to some graduate of engineering and say, there's a computer, everybody's got a computer, they're all connected through wires to each other, through these routers using TCP/IP, make them communicate, implement a system where they communicate. The very last thing you would do is say, well, we'll create this big company here and they'll all just connect to the company, and then the company might let them connect to each other. It's actually ludicrous. It's completely ludicrous. So from an engineering perspective, the internet makes no sense the way it's currently configured. It just doesn't. It's also become even worse because borders themselves are not particularly good things. People across a border don't like each other. If you're Scottish, maybe there's good reason for that. But borders are not great. But the internet is actually creating worse borders than just country borders, because you've now got the English-speaking world border. You've got the Arabic-speaking world border. There's these pseudo-borders which are happening, which are really, really bad news for everyone. It'd be better if IS and all these people were on the same networks as we were, and we could all speak to each other we would stop a lot of the nonsense that's going on. So the SAFE network, when it was envisaged round about the turn of the century, was for these reasons. This is ludicrous. Every single person on the planet should be able to speak to every other person. They should be able to share ideas, share innovation. And that's why it really came about. And then, as we know, the whole crypto thing happened. And that was great for us because we stumbled through an ICO and we got some cash to be able to do this. And from a MadeSafe perspective, in doing this project, we didn't really go to venture capital. We didn't really want to go down that route. We wanted this to almost be the people's network. And from that people's network perspective, it makes huge sense that we don't go to venture capitalists. When the whole crypto thing came along, for us that was quite cool because it was, here's a way of funding the project, but making all the funders just normal people from all over the world who've got a dead keen interest in making this happen. Excuse me. And then we have our community, the forum, which is fantastic because for a long time there I was getting hundreds of emails a day and things. And the forum's great because when people email me or private message, I say, look, ask in the forum because there's nothing that I won't say privately that I wouldn't say in the forum. So that's been a fantastic thing for us, and a lot of people here are here because of that forum. So this the democracy of the way that we run the company, being extremely open, using people in the forum to get input from, works fantastically well. But every silver lining, we as a team in MadeSafe are working obviously to release the system. It's not as fast as we thought it would be, which in some ways that's quite troublesome because you're on the forum trying to make sure that people feel okay. Look, this is all happening. Nobody's worried about anything. It's just taking a wee bit longer. But the folk in the company probably feel the pain more than anyone else. And it's good that they feel that pain because you need a bit of that. And working over the last 2 to 3 years has been pretty hard. You know, we got all these people who are very interested. We went to launch this thing, C++, thought, no, that's not going to work. It's far too complex. It's too important a project to have complex, bad code. It has to be, if we're going to change the world, we're going to have to change the world correctly. We can't just give somebody a big bunch of spaghetti code and say, look, that looks like it works and you'll be okay, and trust your whole civilization to it. So we've taken a lot of time to try and make the code not just open source, and we'll come to that in a couple of minutes. There's some things to be done. Not just open source, but clear code, stuff that you can read. There's documents, there's tutorials, there's tests, so that when the SAFE network's released, it actually is the foundation for all communications and storage and networking and collaboration tools. And it's not that we are wanting to be the only one, but we will be. It's not that we want to be the only one. We do want to collaborate with lots of other projects, but we want to hear about other projects. And I'm very open to working with other projects, but I'm interested in projects that have got at their fundamental goal, the reason for their existence was to help society, not to create some cash, not to jump on a blockstream and a blockchain and say, oh, we're a blockchain thing, give us money. We need people to work with who have got the same vision. It's to protect every single person in the world. If doing that means that all of us get nothing, even all of our investors get nothing, that's what it costs. So our goal is probably a good goal. We're always very vigilant that we are here just to give people security and privacy in their digital life, and give people the freedom to communicate, collaborate, research, cure disease and whatnot. And I'm dead serious when I talk about curing cancer with these kind of projects, because that's what you can do if you let people collaborate properly. And in terms of collaborating with other projects, I want another project to stand in front of us and say, the only reason we're here is to make humanity better. I'm not interested in our storage is cheaper than Dropbox. I couldn't care less. You know, I'll remember something and it'll cost nothing. So our vision is a very strong vision, and I think that vision's echoed in the community. It's certainly echoed in the Made Safe team, and that's something that I think we can be quite proud of, because as we are marching forward and we are now finalising these couple of bits in routing, which you'll hear about today, there seems to be almost no problems left. There's no things left for us to solve on the way to launch, and that's a particularly good place to be. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we've never knee-jerked to a launch. We've never put something out and said, aha, but there's a server somewhere that's actually controlling everything and we'll get rid of it later. We've never deviated from the path of do it right and do it for the right reason. And that to me is something that very, very few projects seem to have. And as soon as we find other projects, and there's a lot of, like Harmon sitting there, there's a lot of people doing projects on the SAFE network, the client-side applications, which fundamentally will be the SAFE network. All the stuff that we're doing in the back end should just happen. It's just the plumbing, it's the carburetor and all the rest of it in the car. That should just all work. The actual SAFE network is going to be what all of you folk and beyond create. And just on that, it's worth considering. It's sort of like if you look at the internet, the web architecture and what we're doing with it, we're kind of destroying it a wee bit. And hopefully we'll destroy some companies that shouldn't exist. And we'll change some business plans that shouldn't exist as well. So we have to stop selling people. But we hear a lot on the forum and in interviews of, oh, you're reinventing the internet. Who do you think you're, like some kind of crazy people? And my sort of approach to that is, if we just reinvented the internet, we'd have done it wrong. We'd have made a huge mistake. What we're doing is we're giving a completely different foundation to developers and all the rest of it. So the worst thing we could do is say, here's Twitter, here's Facebook, here's Google in this new secured foundation. And it would be really good over the next few months now, as we're releasing Alpha 3 and Alpha 4, basically going through beta, that we look at and think hard about the applications that we're doing. And look at different applications. Then do what I was talking about earlier. Go back to Computing 101. And just think, you don't have an internet anymore. You don't even have our APIs. Imagine they weren't there. Just imagine everybody's computer was connected. And when you log into a computer, there's no information on it about you. When you log into it, the screen changes to your computer. You log into a phone, screen changes to your phone. So hardware is separated from the person. If your computer goes fast, great. But if I then use your computer, I'm getting benefit from it. So the computer, what we're doing is that computer is a complete commodity. You could throw it out the window of a plane and get rid of it and just get another one at the airport, and you have lost nothing. The one that you throw out the window of the plane will reveal nothing about you. That's a very powerful thing, being able to go to a phone. Because when you think about the future, then people don't have computers. They walk past one on a wall and ask it something, and it's their computer. So what we're providing is that new world where the computer is a device, is purely a device. There's nothing on that should identify you. If you get stopped at customs with a computer, it would be like getting stopped with your shoe or a belt or something. It's nothing to do with you. And when you've got that kind of world, and you've got this thing where you log in and all your data comes to you, you have a different ability to create applications. Because you could go to the doctor, sit in the doctor's seat, and your medical records could appear at the device that you happen to be near, and the doctor can consult them. And you can walk away, and those will go away again, unless you give them access. If you're working in research for some kind of thing, you could be connected to all the research centres throughout the world safely, securely. If there's IPR involved, you can protect that sort of thing as well. So the types of applications that we should be looking at, I couldn't tell you what they are just now, but I've got a feeling they should not be what you find on the current internet. Current internet's kind of boring, and we need to move forward. A very simple thing that you could imagine is all of these AIs kicking about the place. They've all got their neural networks, which is kind of this piece of code that AI spits out. And if you could share neural networks on a secured network, the one that helps you to read, the one that helps speech recognition, the one that helps with medical imaging, they all start connecting together. You can start creating something a bit different, like a network of neural networks. And they could be made safe by I won't get technical, but by using mutable data, you could make them safe so that you know whose networks you're connecting to, and you could actually start building an awful lot more intelligence. And maybe we could stop fake news and bombing the wrong people and stuff like that, or bombing anybody. So the applications that we look to develop should be completely different. The SAFE network is not the reinvention of the internet. The SAFE network is the thing that just connects every single person in the world together securely. That's what it is. The applications that we put on top of the SAFE network will not be the applications that you find on the internet. They can be, and initially there will be a lot like that. But as our minds expand and we look at it properly, they won't be. AI is going to become a big feature of it for sure. So that's a very brief overview of the way I see things and the reason that the whole thing started. It was not to do what we're doing, it was to do what we should be doing. And I think it's a very powerful story. And Doug's telling me that I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to call that out every time. But no, in terms of where we go directly from here and how the next few months pan out, which I think is the important thing, we'll hear a lot during the day, talks from various members of the team and parts of the team of what you should expect from this afternoon. Actually, there'll be changes from this afternoon all the way through this next year now. Timescales is not something that we talk about. So in terms of timescales, I've just got nothing to say. No, in terms of timescales, I think we need to start worrying less about them. We've been quite diligent in that we will not give a timescale out. And the reason that we've never given timescales out is there's some problems that we still had to solve. There was various issues. Data change was one thing that we had to do. Section graphs, the ordering consensus, that's finalising just now, thank God. But there's been a few different things that we've had to do. There's a lot of work with Crust in terms of security. These low-level libraries, although users shouldn't see them, are absolutely critical to the whole network. In vaults, there's some design changes that we need to make, but there's nothing we need to invent. In routing, the last thing that we've had to research or whatever is finalising now. So we're actually moving into quite an unusual stage for MaidSafe, because when we've got nothing left to research or invent, we know how long it takes to program stuff. We know how long it takes to document it, to test it, to get it correct. You will start now seeing roadmaps with timescales for the next features as we're going along. So that's going to be an interesting thing, because in terms of project management, I think we're actually not bad at that. There's quite a bit of experience, so we will get to a stage of you will know when something's going to launch. And probably what will happen is we'll already have the thing done before we announce the launch date for it. If we don't, it's Stephen's fault. But and I think you could probably guess that was coming, because we have got the likes of Stephen doing all the CI tests, the testing, the distribution of the code, the signing of the code. So we're employing people for that. David at the back there, who's customer service, he's He's going to become much involved with something's wrong, how can we help you? So the reason that all of these people are coming on board, and the likes of Doug and Sarah in the marketing team, is not because we think that there's a problem left that we've got to solve. It's because we know that the problems that we've got to solve are already solvable or solved. So we've come to the end of the big long research period. It's been quite a research period. It's a bit like Elon Musk's 4th launch. That's where we are just now. We're at the point where we know what's in front of us. We will know very soon how long things will take, and we've got the teams in place to start engaging a lot more with the wider community. And there's a lot of people here in the forum and whatnot are extremely helpful, and Neo answers everybody's problems in the forum, and that David will be communicating, contacting all of the people who are quite active in the forum to see about support. And Harman, same with your projects, that we will try and help you with customer support as well. So these are all vital things in release management. These are all vital. So you'll see the company change quite quickly over the next week or so, or month or so. And one of the first things is, do you want to jump up, Viv? And there's a couple of details, and Viv can fly through these, which will be unusual for Viv. Yeah, it takes a while. But Viv's just going to take you through quickly the Alpha 1, Alpha 2, where we are, why we've done what we've done, and then I'll jump back in. Jesus. I'll just stand here.
Yeah, that's a pretty simple objective that David set us. It's certainly not something what I knew when I joined the company in 2011. So I started in the UI and the UX team in 2011, I guess. And that's certainly not what I had. So the aim for the company has always been pretty simple, and it was set clear. I'm just going to move this along. Cheers. So privacy, security, and freedom, and everything had data at its source, protecting users' data, protecting people's privacy, maintaining that people had their freedom intact. And the objective, I'm going to say, is pretty tricky. And yeah, it certainly has taken us quite a long time to get to where we've got to. And one of the things that we focused on right from day one, as most of you guys would know, is getting people to use the APIs, engage with the network. So just having this network that's secure, that's private, that's protected, that's all great. If nobody's using that, you ain't getting anything out of it. So the focus from the original milestones, as we said, that's great that you covered the timeline objectives, so I'm not looking for any questions from that side. But apart from that, so the milestones that we do set and that we did get to has always been focused on how are people engaging with the network, how is it that they're using the APIs, what is being useful for them, what is not being useful for them predominantly, trying to address it, fix it, patch it, move on, all the while getting the backend, as David indicated, getting that in place so that the security of that is also going to be kept intact. So just moving on, so what I'm going to try and do is very quickly summarize where we've come from so far and what we've got to and what we're currently working on as well. So as most of you in this room would know, that was Alpha 1, and I did want to put that timeline because it's been like about 2 years since Alpha 1. That seems like a really long time. So Alpha 1 was the thing that introduced some of the main components from the client side. So self-encryption, self-authentication, the browser with the extensions. We had the structured and dependable data, and then we had that thing that was called the SAFE launcher. Just to, again, very quickly skim over these, self-encryption is where data is shredded, is stored across the XOR address space. No walls that is running it has got any piece of user data that is identifiable back to the user. Not everybody in the network stored the same piece of data. As David again pitched, we don't have the help of the blockchain, or we intentionally do not want such a help. So you have massive advantages with a design such as that. And that is something that you get out of self-encryption in terms of how data is distributed. Self-authentication is a really interesting thing, as again, as many of you are aware of, is the fact that you're logging into a network without a server. You ain't got a server. There isn't somebody sitting in a gateway that's telling you that, yes, your account is valid, it's still valid, you're not allowed to access the network. There's nothing such as that. And this is basically the user authenticating themselves against the network. So these are the features that went out with Alpha 1, and that was great to see that as a proof of concept, a network or a concept such as this can exist. The data types are fine. So you had immutable data along with structured and appendable data as well. Immutable is just data that doesn't change. It brings in massive benefits because of that, because various nodes can cache data. So things like DOSing particular groups in the network, things like that don't really happen anymore because cache data can come. So traditionally what you get with websites and things like that is where when things get much more busier, you start seeing sites go down. And with data that is immutable, that is cacheable, and that is cached, you actually see that sites that are more busy are more faster in a kind of a weird way to understand it, just purely because of caching and how data can be spread across the network and delivered from nodes that are closer to the source rather than going to the actual nodes that are keeping the original copies itself. Launcher was the first thing that we put in. So Launcher was something that was introduced for a very specific reason. That was, while data is being protected in the network, the whole point of the SAFE network is it's a platform. You want people to be storing their data on it, accessing it, benefiting out of it, sharing and collaborating with what they choose to rather than what they're told to. And Launcher aimed to address that problem by providing a single source where the user disclosed their confidential information. So passwords are something that is never transmitted in the SAFE network outside the user's computer, as we know. So Launcher is something that was aimed to hold the user's credentials, pass it over to the network, authenticate it. Once the user is authenticated with the network, then the launcher allows the other applications to impersonate the user and access the user's data. So it kind of acted as a gateway to manage and monitor applications accessing users' data in the network, which was great as far as Alpha 1 is concerned. But just moving on from Alpha 1, the next thing that we had about a year after was Alpha 2. So some of the key problems, as I just get to, with the same model was Launcher started acting very much as a gateway. Launcher was the single thing that you needed to constantly keep running, that was managing all your apps. It wasn't that great for mobile because you're depending on two different things running. There's one thing that's monitoring. Apps are not talking to the network directly. So how do we go about fixing it? And that's where one of the key things that was highlighted there, the authenticator stepped in. So the launcher basically transitioned into the authenticator. So what the launcher aimed to do in terms of how it was authenticating the user, how it was letting the apps access the user's data, was moved from client side to the network side. So again, the network without servers, as I already mentioned. So the main managers, the personas in the walls, they started stepping up. They were the ones that were authenticating an application. So a user could go to the network, register their interest, and allow a particular app to access or be privileged to access a portion of their data. And then the network was managing it and monitoring the same as well. And then we had mutable data. So mutable data is quite interesting there because we already had structured and appendable data. So if we consider that is also mutable data brought app permissions or data permissions to a data layer itself. So that was some way where users could start sharing data and allowing people access to modify it, mutate it, insert, delete done in a particular way with the Alpha 2 network. And then Alpha 2 also saw the introduction of mobile apps. Mobile apps, again, just with Xamarin that touched on iOS and Android, was very much a proof of concept, and it still is a proof of concept there. It was just to showcase why the authenticator was put in place, why the model with Launcher wasn't that great for the network, and how that kicked in and how that actually functioned at that point. And by this time, the main thing that I would like to indicate about Alpha 2 itself is the fact that Alpha 2 is not a milestone that we consider as something that we met in September 2017 and carried on, but it's something that we're still constantly maintaining, and we're going to be maintaining as we move on up to Alpha 4. And the concept is basically the same as where we started with. Front-end devs using the APIs, communicating what they want, what they do not want. That does not really impact how the network itself operates. So the routing layer that needed to be secured and people running walls from home. So we had a few testnets where we tried the same thing as well. Oh yeah, we did. We had a few testnets where we had people running walls from home and seeing how that functioned. But ultimately, in terms of the front-end APIs and the network as a platform, it was great to see the feedback that we would be getting out of Alpha 2 to revise these APIs and introduce features that the app devs can use, which is where most of the community talks today are based on and from as well. And one of the things that we improved, with Josh sitting right there, is the browser. So the browser had its extensions built in, then the community voiced their opinion in terms of how we would rather like to have a browser that focused purely on the SAFE network. And that was, again, because of the fact that if you're going for extensions and things like that, you're not really sure what else are those browsers doing, what are they accessing, is anything being leaked to ClearNet, is everything about the SAFE network. So giving users control of their data is something that is primarily the main objective here itself. And app devs, the main thing with Alpha 2, the main objective is seeing what works, what doesn't work, keep refactoring and updating those APIs, while the backend is streamlining their updates going into the network itself. Again, just touching on that point, one of the things that I would like to highlight before moving on to Alpha 3 is the feedback that we get for Alpha 2 is really great. So as we're getting more and more feedback about Alpha 2, there are a couple things that we keep hearing quite often. And as one of the things that most of you people would be able to guess is documentation. So how do we get started with the network? How do we start using these APIs? You mentioned all these languages. Where do we get started? Where do we go for help? And the primer document, as I highlighted, is a great piece of resource that tells how the network is structured, how things operate, and things there. But in terms of the actual APIs, the bindings, how did you use this in mobile? What platforms would this work on? Where is the support? What APIs are stable? What's getting deprecated? So this kind of needed resource for people to actually start getting into. The community is great, and people that are experienced were able to look at these APIs and get going. But people that are new to the ecosystem found it a bit too hard. So again, as most of you guys would have already seen from the forum from last night, I think it was last night that we made it live. So we have the Dev Hub that's live at hub.safedev.org today, and that is purely intended as a documentation website. So it's meant to be as a toolkit for devs to start engaging with the network, not just from the front-end side or building an app, but from the core library side as well. So to start knowing about the internals of the system, which there are quite a few community members that are insanely great in terms of the help that they provide with different parts of Alpha 3 that we'd be going into. But so this is meant to be something, along with the dev forum and the community forum, is meant to be a toolkit for devs to find everything that they would need to get started and get engaged with the system, start building their applications, see how they can get it to scale up, how can they collect the information from users, and then collaborate and hopefully develop more things. That is the first thing that I would say that we hear the most about. The second thing that we again hear most about from loads of people in the community is the stuff about our licensing. So licensing for app devs and for core devs has always been quite tricky, that I would use as the word here. It's the thing that we have with the commercial license and GPL3. So people always end up asking us the question about what is this commercial license? How does this actually work? What does that actually mean? But the network has SafeCoin, proof of resource. Isn't that how app devs are supposed to get rewarded? So why is this license there? So at that point, that is also something that we've been hearing too often and something that we wish to address today. I'll actually pass it over to David right now for a couple minutes just to say what we're thinking about this one and how we hope to address this too.
Yeah, on the licensing, what we've decided to do is, it's quite loud. What we've decided to do is remove all the confusion. I'm a huge GPL supporter. I like forced freedom. GPL is very good for that forced freedom, where if you take this stuff, you can do what you want with it, but you must give it back. You must give it back. Do you want me to do that? So GPL is exceptionally good for making sure that, yeah, software is available to everybody, but you must always keep it open source. You must put the changes back. We we met, well, it was years ago, we met actually one of the authors of GPL3, lawyer chap, quite interesting. And we made this decision that we would have this contributor agreement. If you put code into the main SAFE system, it's going to be GPL, but we can also do anything we want with it. Which sounds really good, because it sounds like somebody saying to you, look, you're completely in control, completely in charge, and all the rest of it. And it's actually quite, it's against our principles, really, to do that. The other problem with GPL, though, is then application developers are like, oh, do I have to make my thing GPL? I want maybe a commercial advantage by doing something slightly different, or I want to do proprietary stuff. Personally, I would think, yeah, that's great. Just do proprietary stuff and someone else hopefully will do a better open source one. But that's my own personal opinion, and we've realised that we can't have our opinions being foisted on people quite so rigorously. So what we've done, and from this point forward, all of the core libraries in MadeSafe, all of them that make the SAFE network, are pure GPL3. There's no commercial license, there's no contributor agreement, pure GPL3. We will enforce freedom, and we will remove any possibility we have of retaining control of that code. So that'll be gone. So the core system is open. I'm talking right into my chin here with this thing now. In terms of the application developers, there at that point, what we've decided to do is make all the APIs for the application developers MIT BSD. So basically, do what you want. You don't need to give code back. You don't need to make it open source. Do exactly what you want. So the application developers are completely free now to take those APIs and create their own projects, their own programs, and license them in whatever way they choose. And that's giving all the developers the complete freedom to do what they want. At the same time, we're making sure that the core of the SAFE network is always purely GPL, purely GPL3. And that's a great position for us to be in. So from today, I think we can say from today, Nick, yeah? Nick says from today-ish, that's the case. All of the changes in terms of the language and stuff won't be in the repositories for a couple of days, but that's it. So SAFE network will be pure GPL. There'll be no real debate about that. The core thing is now going to have this enforced freedom. The application developers thing is going to do what you want, basically. Create anything that you want to create. So I think that's pretty much us, and we're just going to move on.
Yeah, go into the Alpha 3 stuff.
Yeah, you want to discuss Alpha 3 for Viv's going to discuss Alpha 3. Just before he does, can I just say, the team at MadeSafe met up a few days ago, and they're really brilliant people, so do mix with them. But for today, I think we should thank Doug, Nick, Sarah, Victoria, Kaylee, Sharon, Jim, and Shona, who eventually made it. You were late, Shona. For today, they've done a great job. But during the thing with the company, I kind of spoke about certain individuals that were doing quite remarkable things, and that took a while. There was quite a few, but I missed one out in terms of the team leaders, and it's Spandan there. Spandan's done a fantastic job in leading routing and Crust, and become involved in a huge amount of libraries and work, and I missed him 2 days ago when I was doing the shout out. So thanks very much, Spandan, for all your work. But I'll pass you back to Viv.
Sure. I'm not thanking you. Yeah. No surprise there. But yeah, let's move on from this. So the thing most people are looking forward to and wondering about as well is Alpha 3. So I think David touched on a few points there. So in terms of Alpha 3, what is Alpha 3? how does it compare to Alpha 2? So up to Alpha 2, front-end APIs, how are app devs engaging with the system? And let me stress that point again, that is something that is going to continue all the way up to Alpha 4 in terms of the features getting added to the system and so on. So Alpha 3 is kind of looking at it at a layer below. So Alpha 3 is somewhere where you don't really have walls, you don't have clients, at least as far as SAFE client libs and stuff are concerned. So it's looking at the routing layer itself, it's looking at that networking layer and saying, how are people running these nodes from home, and how are these things like disjoint sections, data chains, all of the different parts of it, how they're going to function, how's this thing going to be secure and scale up so that user data can then get stored onto the Alpha 3 network itself. So that is one of the key points about Alpha 3. So making the network internal, stable, reliable, secure, it goes without saying. And it's been going on for a while, just like everything else. So it's been going on for like around 12 to 18 months. And it started even before Alpha 2. It started at a point when I still used to have hair, I think. So it's like, it's been going on for an insanely long amount of time. And we are quite glad to be getting towards the tail end of that one. So yeah, those are some of the points in terms of Alpha 3 itself. But the key point to understand is when we were looking at that entire circle and those different pieces coming together in terms of self-authentication, the authenticator, the API, mutable data, all of those things, we always keep pointing to one block and just name it routing. And that's the objective. That's Alpha 3, secure routing layer. It sounds pretty simple. But today, all I wanted to kind of list out was just some key points in saying routing by itself has quite a few objectives in Alpha 3, and most of which are already on the forum, and they've been on the forum for a while in terms of the RFCs and the proposals. And there's still some work going on, and I think the guys are going to be touching on another RFC or a proposal that should be making its way out quite soon that few people in the community are already aware of. So the first part of it, just in terms of the different part, you got data chains and section graph, and that is something that gets you the structure of the network, and it gives you the progression of the network. So that tells you who's where in the network, who formed the sections in the network, how did they mutate in terms of the member list, how is this member list progressing from one version to another version, so that currently routing with Alpha 2 is working on a snapshot basis. Everything is the latest, everybody knows who the latest are, or they expect to know who the latest are. But data chain kind of gives you this history of information. It kind of tells you this is what happened, and this is what this section is now going to, and all the other parts kind of interlink to that to get the benefit out of it. And data chains and section graph are, I think, even two proposals in the forum, and they're different parts of both put together. And that has been one of the key things in terms of designing or getting the implementation design for Alpha 3, which is none of these things are an individual component. All of them kind of like plug and play together with each other, and designing it, you kind of need to think about all of them at the same time. So data chains and section graph kind of sits at the heart of it in terms of being able to give this historic progression of the network and how things plug and play with each other. Moving on to the next thing, that would be node aging. So again, people from the community have been insanely interested about node aging, and very, very helpful in terms of the feedback and the simulations and the tests, and how node relocation, how is age going to be coming into play, and things such as that. Node aging is a pretty simple concept. Again, it comes down to the things that David says about like seeing things in nature, kind of playing that into the network. And nodes are trustless in the network. When they start new in the network, there's not a whole lot of weight and knowledge and trust that is placed in these nodes. As they serve time in the network, as they play part of the community and they're serving requests and they spend time, their age is something that is growing, and the more trustworthy a node gets, it's got a bigger say in terms of group consensus, in terms of the opinion that it shares with its peers in a particular section with disjoint sections. So that is predominantly where node aging by itself goes in. And then the next thing, of course, that we have to deal with, which I could skip very easily over, is we are not having a blockchain, so not everybody in the network has got the same piece of information. Forget just the data that's stored in the network, which is even more insane if you think about the blockchain, but not even section information is something people from one side of the network in the XR space are not aware exactly of the different half of the network. people know more about their own surroundings, they know about their neighbors, and with data chain, they've got the progression of that information. And as messages travel through the network, messages are routed by libraries such as routing, but at no given point do you have something like a blockchain where everybody are expected to have the same information and build that information going forward. So that is also something to keep in mind for Alpha 3 and bring out as a feature. And node knowledge about the network. So that's the point in terms of how much does a node know, how much should a node know, where is deduplication fitting into this, and how is data replicated and preserved in the network? How do you structure the sections so that nodes that are constantly going online and offline are not going to trigger data loss? So while Alpha 3 at its primary level is not dealing with user data, it would still need to deal with the groups, the number of nodes that you've got in a group. Those are the people that are responsible for that XOR address space and manage and maintain that data. So that's, again, a key part of Alpha 3. And then we get to the point about the problem with everything that we've had till Alpha 2 is handling eventual consistency. And it comes exactly because of that idea, because not everybody's got the same information. Everybody's working on an expectation of what they expect from their peers, what they expect from the neighboring sections. And things are eventually consistent. And eventual consistency buys a lot of advantages in its primary sense. When you're dealing with data, such as immutable data or something like that, so data that doesn't change, two different nodes might not really care about which data they stored first. As long as they store both pieces of data, they might be good. That's all that might be required out of them. But there are use cases where it is nice, given a set of peers in a given section, who got added into a section first, who left the section first, when did we decide to trigger a merge, when did we decide to trigger a split. And information such as that is deterministic and is consistent among peers, given a same sequence of events or a shared state, is very advantageous to a system such as this, because it helps identify maliciousness, penalize people that are not playing by the rules. In an eventually consistent system, it's harder to penalize people because they might have just not been aware of the fact that there was an extra node that got added into the network and they should have triggered a split. But when you are handling eventual consistency, and if you have an ordered consensus pattern, then via such patterns, what you're getting is that you are setting a rule set that you're saying all nodes should be having the same behavior. This is the behavior that we expect out of them. And if they don't do that, then probably they're misbehaving, and then the group can act on it and then potentially either remove that node or bump its age down or handle that without a doubt of was this node just eventually consistent. So that is something which is what the routing team are currently working on, and it's something that we're hoping to take into an RFC and a proposal soon enough, as Spanu will probably talk about in a little while. But moving on from that one, then we get to the final point about secure message relay. So it's not like none of these points were simple enough. Secure message relay kind of takes the icing. The fact about not everybody knowing each other, as we've just said. However, you want to trust messages. You want to send messages from one side of the system to the completely other side. And you want these messages to ideally get there in one piece and to be able to believe in them. How do you believe in something that you're not aware of rather than just hope for the good? And that's the process of secure message relay. And it comes down to an example that David keeps mentioning in our team calls too often. He mentions a lot of examples in team calls, by the way. But one such thing that he mentions quite often is the fact about, like, you're sending a post, you're mailing this to the other side of the country. You don't, the post office down the street where you start sending the post, if you still actually send post, that is they are not aware of the other side of the country. They don't know about the streets. They don't know about the postcodes. So things start, as you get closer and closer to the destination of the address, the information about the address starts making more sense. So initially, all you probably care about is the country, the area code, then the street name, then the door number, and hopefully somebody to actually collect it at the end. And that is a very interesting concept of secure message relay and the network, because as we just mentioned, nodes know a lot about their own address space and they know about their neighbors, but they don't know completely about every other part of the system. So routing traverses this network and helps messages get to the other side, but thereby you also need to believe that this message is genuine, it's not being tampered with, it's not being edited or something like that. And secure message relay is the process that basically brings all of this in. So if we combine basically all of these things, that's where we would be able to say Alpha 3 is good. Alpha 3 is good for a test net, or we can start testing it, and then we can hopefully start taking it to an Alpha 3 stage itself. What that would then get us is this secure routing layer that nodes can exist on. People can add nodes, remove nodes. It's not dealing with user data. That is still getting scaled in with Alpha 2, and then hopefully in the future milestones, those two things can get merged over, where the data layer comes on top of the Alpha 3 objectives itself. So just moving on from Alpha 3. So thereby, when we go beyond Alpha 3, so now that we've almost said that, out of all of these parts, that one part about routing has all of these sub-layers that we need to cater to for the Alpha 3 requirement itself, we still have kind of a missing block without an icon there. And that kind of signifies what finishes the circle in terms of the data access layer and SafePoint that needs to come in, because the economy of the network plays a huge part about why would nodes not want to misbehave, what kind of incentivizes them to gain and higher age and stay in the network and provide data to other people for a longer amount of time. So all of those questions get answered via the milestones that hopefully start coming in after Alpha 3, and at which point Alpha 4, which would be the Alpha 3 layer merged in with the data access layer, can bring the features together to complete the safe network, if that makes sense. But yeah, that would, I think, kind of summarize this part of the presentation, but I think we got some time for a Q&A.